All right, welcome everyone. This is the Data and Performance Management meeting for July 2021. If you have not already, please enter your agency name into the chat box so we know who is participating. We have a short agenda today. I want to talk some more about the data quality plan. We started this conversation last month. And then we're going to talk about the emergency shelter project performance report that was released earlier this week. So, like I said, we did talk about this last month. We also sent out a copy of the data quality plan as well as the related documents. And so first, I wanted to kind of open it up to feedback from the group. So this is the data quality plan. The first part of the plan goes into the different components of data quality, which we talked about last month. And in addition to kind of defining that type of data quality, it also goes over where you can look at that data and how to make corrections on that data at kind of a high level. And then if there are thresholds for that data element or that data component, those are also included here. So I kind of wanted to break it up by section a little bit. So first, I wanted to hear from the group if anybody had any feedback regarding the data quality components section. So that's data completeness, data accuracy, data consistency, and I think those are the big ones, yes. So any feedback from the group for those that were able to review it or had feedback from last time?
Hey, Erin, Damona with Wise Place. Honestly, I'm still in the reviewing process, so I do apologize for that, and I don't have any feedback at this time.
Okay, no worries. Thanks, Damona. And if you don't have, if you're not on the phone or if you don't have a microphone, you can also type any feedback into the chat. All right. The next section of the data quality plan, it goes over the monitoring and reporting process. So most of you should already be familiar with this process. It's pretty much going through, it's just writing out what we're already doing. So at the end or at the beginning of each new quarter, 211 compiles corrections for the agencies for data completeness, and those are sent to you, and you have about 2 weeks to make those revisions, and then we pull the final data and publish it on our website. So that's what's written out in this section, and we also have due dates for those, which could be adjusted a little bit with holidays and weekends, but generally this is the timeline for those revisions. Did anyone have feedback on that process that they wanted to share? It's going perfect for everybody. Okay. The next section of the data quality plan goes over the different reports that we have in HMIS that can look at these different components of data quality. So you can see the names of the reports, what they are reviewing, and as well as other data resources like cheat sheets and dashboards. And we also include with this a tools and reports table. So it kind of goes over similar information, but it lays it out for you in a chart and is a little more streamlined in the content. So we have that for each type of data quality. And then we also have a reference guide, which goes a little bit deeper into the details on specific data elements that are included as part of the data quality process, and what the different errors that you're receiving from us mean and how to resolve them. Did the group have any feedback on those documents or that part of the process?
I think this looks beautiful, Erin.
Thanks, buddy.
I second what Cassie was saying.
I mean, this is all stuff that you guys, you pretty much send out like in periodic emails and trainings, and everything's just lumped here. And I think it's great that, somebody new coming on board would have like essentially like a handbook to reference instead of having to like chase down, these various emails or like knowledge guides or whatnot. It's just all here. So I think it looks great. I think everything, has always been in the plainest English possible. So anybody who is, new or training or, need a refresher, are able to understand it. And I think it looks great.
Thanks, buddy. That's actually like exactly what we were trying to do, is get everything we knew about data quality and just throw it in one place.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that came through.
Yeah, and as somebody who's been doing this forever now, or it feels like, a lot of this stuff is like second nature. But again, like I know like sometimes we struggle with training people on new things or like this type of work. So it's good. I think like I probably wouldn't reference it as much as somebody else that's like newer or whatever, but yeah, that's definitely like exactly what came through. And Catherine, I'm sorry to cut you off over and over again.
No worries at all. I did not view it as you cutting me off. I was happy to listen to your feedback. But the only other thing I was going to say, in addition to what Cassie said, is that I think that especially listing out those reports that people could use in the appendices are tremendously helpful, and kind of giving everyone that heads up of when the quarterly due dates would be is also extremely helpful, so that if an agency knows that maybe that time frame isn't going to work for them, they could run those reports ideally on their own, maybe before you send those out, so that they could at least get started on that and then just make some tweaks here and there. But I think that was, I think that this is really well put together, and will be very helpful to all of us who maybe are used to doing, a lot of this, like Cassie said, but, also want to train new people. And sometimes that can be a little bit difficult to translate what you know and how you know it when you're training someone else. So I think that these tools will really fill that gap that that some of us may be experiencing. So I think it's great, Erin.
Okay, great. Other feedback on the data quality plan? Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about what our data quality is looking like over the past year, and then get a little bit into a kind of a deeper dive into incentives and enforcements. We started talking about it last month, but wanted to go a little deeper this time. So first I wanted to provide a little bit of context. So in 2020, every agency in HMIS scored 80% or better on their average data quality score in at least one quarter. The lowest data quality score for an agency at a whole in any quarter was 74%. And so what the average data quality score is it's looking at all the possible data elements that should be entered for your clients according to HUD requirements. And of all those data elements, what percentage of those were valid responses? So, and a valid response is anything that obviously is a HUD response that is not don't know, refuse, data not collected, or missing. It also is a valid response also means that there are no data issues with the response. And so data issues are like if a social security number is all nines or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that kind of stuff is considered a data issue. So every agency was at least 80% or better in one or more quarters in 2020. And on the project level, every project also had 80% or better in at least one quarter. The lowest average data quality score in any quarter was 72%. And there were 82 projects that met the data quality thresholds for their project type in every quarter of 2020. And that's about 25% of our projects. And then going into some specific data elements, I looked at the data elements with the lowest amount of valid responses. And then I also looked at the data elements that had, or I looked at projects that had less than 80% valid responses on specific data elements. And so no surprise, the data element with the most issues was SSN data quality. And this could be because some clients don't have the SSN, they don't want to provide it, or it could also be data issues like I mentioned. The following data element was destination. Again, this is not really surprising, especially when we have a large percentage of emergency shelter clients with missing destination because they sometimes disappear, and which we'll get into a little bit more with the project performance stuff. Length of stay in prior living situation also had a higher level of missing responses, which I thought was kind of interesting. So this is the question. First, Clarity will ask, where was the client staying last night? And you'll answer that. The following question is, how long was the client staying there, which is this field that has missing responses. So I don't know if anyone had any insight into that and why that field has so much missing data. Have any of you struggled to collect how long someone was staying in their prior living situation?
Hi, this is Cambridge with Friendship Shelter. In my experience, a lot of times people don't know how long they were staying in a place. They're not really keeping track of the days that well. So I have run into that issue before.
Okay. Does anybody else have that similar experience?
I think we all do. Also, I think a lot of people in our agency refuse to give us just information in general. You know, so that might be a thing as well.
Does anyone have a strategy for trying to help them remember that field? I know that for approximate date started, you know, someone will ask, do you know the last time you were in housing? And therefore the day after that, you know, would be their homeless start date. But do you have a similar method of trying to help a client remember how long they were staying somewhere prior to coming to your project?
I mean, no explicit strategies. We try to encourage them through whatever frames of reference they might have for when they became homeless or when they were last in housing. But honestly, it can come down to how cooperative the client is, how much of an effort the case manager is putting in that day. It's a variety of factors.
Just one thing to add to this too, especially just in terms of coordinated entry, I guess is the lens I'm using this for. But I think it's possible that sometimes maybe that information isn't necessarily captured at enrollment, and kind of, you know, maybe that's not information that the client has at enrollment, going back to like what Cassie and John Paul just said about, you know, clients may not know or may not give up that information right away. And that maybe that's something that's kind of teased out a little bit more as you work more with a household, as you get to know their history more. And when that happens, it may just not be then, you know, inputted into that place, you know, later on. It is one possibility that I'm thinking of. Could also just be a misinterpretation of what that prior living situation means. I know sometimes we've run into it where sometimes people view that as not like where they spent the night before, but when they were last permanently housed, is sometimes how that's interpreted. So it could be that as well, but I think that a lot of times it could just be something that's kind of clarified later on as you work with a household more, and it's just a matter of it not getting put into the system.
Okay. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that data element? Okay, so, and then the next 4 data elements I was kind of surprised about. Race, disabling condition, ethnicity, and veteran status. So these also were the data elements with the highest amount of issues, and it is a lot less than the top 3. So it could be something specific to how the project is collecting this information. But I would think these would normally be easier data elements to collect because they're more demographic level and are less nuanced with like HUD definition. Does anyone have experience with difficulty collecting these data elements, these last 4, or any thoughts on these?
I'm going to give the same response. A lot of times it's just a refusal, honestly, just refusal across the board. And, you know, sometimes we're lucky if we even get their name. But I know also that these are things that, especially like, I know like we changed the way that we're entering data. So even if we're getting people refusing to give us information, yet we're offering services to them, we are putting them into HMIS because that's the way that we're supposed to be doing it, which I'm sure bogs down the system. And this is kind of what I was afraid of when we started doing this, but this is kind of also like, we did it because it's the proper way to do it. But I do see that a lot. And we have, you know, we have this CCRT project that is huge and very fast paced. And it's literally like a tattletale program where people call us or like the PD and they're like, hey, go talk to this homeless person that's by my house. I don't like them there. And so, you know, one person turns into 4 people and maybe one person talks to us, but then we also have to like, you know, try and convince the other 3 people to like give us information and work with us, and they want nothing to do with us. So kind of one of those situations is what I'm thinking.
Okay.
I blame it on us, basically. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
I would also add that oftentimes it's not just a refusal to provide that information, because dependent on the time of day or night or evening that the resident was brought in or the individual was brought into the intake, it is a lot of information to ask up front. they were just, out there for an hour or 30 or 40 minutes with the outreach team. So by the time they come in, they're like, you're asking me the same information. But when it talks about ethnicity specifically, with so many entities and organizations, even medical practices, giving you the option to no longer disclose, residents or potential new residents are saying, like, why are you still asking for this information? Because it now is an option for us to not disclose disability, race, or ethnicity. That's an actual option on a lot of applications. So something for us to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Also, one thing to just add, I think most oftentimes we see that race is put down as data not collected or client refused. Most often that will be selected that way, and then the ethnicity will be selected as Hispanic or Latino. And I think a lot of times, like in trying to navigate some of those conversations with some of the families that are being served, is that they don't necessarily know what to select for race because they just identify as Hispanic or Latino, and like for HUD purposes, it's separated out, but that's not necessarily how they would, like categorize or identify themselves as it being separate. So I think that that's one thing. And then, maybe it's just a matter of not taking the time to like navigate that conversation and, try to get that information from them. I'm not sure, but that is one thing that we've heard, is that, they'll just opt to refuse or, say that they don't know, so that they can just select the ethnicity as Hispanic or Latino is something that we've seen. And then I think the disabling condition part, I think it's still such a struggle, even though I love the text box that's in there that says, you selected that there is no disabling condition, but then you're answering that, yes, there is one of the subtypes of disabling condition. I think that that's helpful. But for some reason, I think that we still see that there are people who will select no to a disabling condition and then select yes to one of the disabling condition types. And that of course impacts data quality too. So just that's all I have on those two things.
Yeah, that I will second that, Catherine. It's lovely that everybody, I think maybe a couple people started paying attention to the pop-up boxes and like all the little hints and clues, but man, we still see it so much. And we're like, we have trained you on this one-on-one. Like there's literally like, it's giving you instruction because you've done it wrong and they're still skipping over it. So I don't know what else to say about that.
Oh, go ahead, Caitlin.
I was just going to add on to that because I am constantly fixing those disabling conditions, those questions. Like I'm going back and trying to fix the first one when I see that pop up. But what I've noticed specifically for that question is a lot of clients will say, I don't know, to like the follow-up questions. Because they don't know if it's going to be long-term and stuff. I don't know seems to be a very popular answer for disabling conditions when asking the clients that.
Okay, and I wanted to ask either Caitlin or Cassie or anybody else, how are you finding the clients that said like, yes, I have a disability, but then they didn't select a disability type or vice versa?
So what I do is I run like a program details report for each individual program, and then I just filter it. So it's a little time consuming, but I just go in and I'll filter it and I'll select the first question. Like I'll filter it to say all yeses, and then I'll go in and make sure that there's actually like a yes on one of those additional questions to make the first question yes, and then I'll filter it to no. And if I see that they said, no, I don't have a disabling condition, but yes, I have a developmental disability or something, then I'll go in and like just change the first question again to fix that.
Okay.
Just to chime in on that, Caitlin absolutely does it the right way because we've noticed that the HUD APRs, when we run them, only catch the false negatives, that is people who say no to disabling condition and should have one, not the false positives, those who say yes, they do, and then don't have a follow-up that affirms it.
Interesting, JP. We don't have APR, like we don't have any HUD funded programs, so I don't run APRs too often unless I'm like really trying to just get at, answers. But good catch. That's interesting.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, JP. And we are working on making that a little easier to find also, but that's good information for those of you that are COC funded. I also have a comment from Shannon. I've noticed race, ethnicity, and disabling condition are more of a lack of training on the person inputting it. Okay, thanks, Shannon. All right. Any other comments on those four before we keep going? Also wanted to mention when looking at the data quality for this previous quarter, our Q1 of 2021, there were 5 projects with at least 4 data elements that had less than 80% valid responses. So before we keep going, overall, I would say our data quality is very good as a COC. I know Cassie is concerned, but yes, overall, I would say we are doing well, and not to say that there isn't always room for improvement, but we're doing pretty well, So
thanks for making me feel better about that.
It'll be okay. Okay, so now I wanted to talk some more about potential incentives and potential enforcements. And then I do have a little poll for everybody too when we get through these. So as part of the data quality plan, it is recommended to have incentives and enforcements. It's not a requirement. So we've been trying to kind of think through what that would look like. So any of these or none of these are on the table, as well as any other wacky ideas that you guys might have. Feel free to bring those up also. But a couple that I thought of for incentives was potentially a $500 award to agencies that meet the data quality thresholds for all 4 quarters in the calendar year. I was so one of my poll questions that I'm going to ask the group is if incentives should be at the agency level or project level or even data element level. So think about that. Another potential incentive I was considering was a $50 award for each project at the agency that met the data quality thresholds for their project type in all 4 quarters of the calendar year. The reason that might be better than an agency award is there are some agencies that have 40 projects and there are some agencies that have 1 project. So doing this at the project level might kind of balance it out a little bit and kind of make it a little more fair for everyone. The other incentive was if we didn't move forward with either of these awards would also be announced on our HMIS website, which you could share that information with potential funders. Say, hey, look, we're awesome. Got a comment from Shannon agreeing that project level seems more fair. Does anyone have thoughts on these incentives or ideas for other incentives that are not on here?
I think project level seems more fair. I agree with Shannon.
Catherine also agreeing. Okay. And feel free if you like. I was struggling with the incentives. So if you guys have other ideas, would love to hear it. But I just kind of know money seems to be, a really good incentivizer. All right. So this is enforcements, and some of these are related, so it's not like a bunch of different enforcements. But the first was agencies or projects whose average data quality score is less than 80% for all 4 quarters in the calendar year will be put on a performance improvement plan for the following calendar year. And if you remember from the previous slides, right now there are no agencies or projects that fall into that category of 80% or less. And projects, or another enforcement idea that I had was projects with at least 4 data elements under 80% in any quarter will receive customized technical support from 211. So it's not quite the same as a performance improvement, because I'll get into like the other things I was considering for performance improvement. This one would be more casual and not as strict, I guess I would say. So I guess the easiest way to talk about this is to go on what happens if the performance improvement doesn't work out. So if an agency is on a performance improvement plan and the goals of that plan are not met in the next calendar year, if they're not required to participate in HMIS, then they would be removed. And then they could apply again in another year if they wanted to be reinstated. If they are required to be in HMIS, then their funders would be notified so that they're aware of their data quality. Another potential enforcement would be those on a performance improvement plan would not be eligible to apply for funding that's awarded through the COC board. And the reason for that is, you know, if the data quality is bad for their existing projects, then it may not be a good idea to fund them for additional. So those are the enforcements I thought of. And so like I was saying, those last 3 wouldn't apply to those that are getting technical support. It would be the technical support is more a conversation on these are the data elements that it looks like you're struggling with. Let's talk through, you know, why you're struggling, some potential strategies for improving them. And maybe it's more training for your staff. Maybe it's more computers, or I don't know what it is, but it, you know, how can we improve these scores? But there's not a penalty associated if you don't, you know, improve those scores.
I would like that training now.
You may not qualify, Cassie.
I always feel like we need help. I always feel like I need help. Like, I don't know, not necessarily like getting our staff to do what they're supposed to do, but kind of like, you know, bigger picture, I guess. Like, I'm pretty much like, we're all in the weeds with our staff, like trying to like, you know, individually like pinpoint problems and stuff. So I'm always scared that we're going to be like on this list.
What do you, when you say training on bigger picture, what does that look like?
I don't know, just strategy. I mean, I just feel like street outreach doesn't have much help. We just had our audit with Adriana and a smattering of your staff. And that was one of the things that I was actually bringing up, was that like there isn't a whole lot of guidance. So I think that's where like I find myself, like, it might just be me being insecure about like how we're doing, but I just find myself kind of flailing, not really knowing like if we're really doing this properly, you know, and how to improve on that. And if it's normal that we're getting, you know, so much of these people who, you know, don't want to talk to us, and, you know, I feel like it's bogging down the system. But it is what it is, I guess. We can only do what we can do. But yeah, I think that this is a great strategy, is kind of what, you know, just listening to these things, like, I think that if I were struggling, I would love to have these. You know, I wouldn't want to be on like a, you know, performance improvement plan necessarily, because then you're wearing the dunce hat. But like, you know, I think that if this was ever our agency, like, I would love this help. You know what I mean? So I think that I think this is very nice. You know, and it's just a lot of work on your end, but I think it's worth it if that ever does happen.
Yeah.
Hey, Erin, this is Shannon. My only comment or thought would be, and I don't know if this is possible because I know there's an extreme amount of projects in HMIS, but if an award or enforcement system is rolled out, I'm wondering, is there a way to filter out some of these things that are never going to improve, such as if a project serves primarily undocumented residents, they are never, ever going to have data quality on the socials, or an emergency, a low barrier shelter that, you know, 80% of people are just kind of abandoning their bed and they're never going to have an exit interview, or, you know, such like that, because it really, like, I know like the overall score matters, and those certain buckets that there's absolutely nothing, no matter how much training you can do. Like if someone's undocumented, they just don't have a social, there's nothing you can do about it, is really going to bring down that score. And I would hate to see, you know, good projects and programs running, but also, you know, hey, you're on a performance plan, or we have to let your funders know you're not meeting these data qualities, even though the data qualities are not applicable to that particular project. Just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I agree. And that would be part of the conversation if we were giving technical support, or if we had to do a performance improvement plan with a project. I think the first meeting would kind of be like, okay, so what's going on? These are the data elements it looks like you're struggling with. And, you know, if they say we take all undocumented clients and therefore SSN is always going to be 0%, then I think we would just say, all right, well, that is what it is. And then we wouldn't put a goal around that specific data element. Because we wouldn't, you know, we want to set you up for success. And so we have to include it on like the reports we do, and include it in the average score. But we wouldn't set goals for you that aren't going to be achievable.
That totally makes sense. I get it. I just, you know, like Cassie, like you're concerned, you want your agency to do well, but if you're, you know, hitting 95% in every category and then 0 in SSN, you're going to score extremely low. That's going to bring your average down, and you're always going to look like you're not doing well. But I know that's a bigger systems issue that we can't really solve at this point.
Adriana, are we still including the SSN in the average data quality score, or did we remove that?
I think we're still including it.
Okay, we could talk about that. I feel like at one point we did remove it. Maybe that was a long time ago, but yeah, that's something that we could talk about also. Other thoughts on enforcements? Does anybody hate these?
I don't necessarily have a thought on the enforcements part, but I think one thing that would be tremendously helpful and I'm sure that you are already thinking of this, but to know like at what point or like who it was that entered the data that, you know, is maybe contributing to a lower score, not to know that punitively, but if they're instead of needing to like retrain, you know, your entire staff, if there's maybe one staff member who just needs a little bit more support, knowing that you can provide that to that person. And I think one more thing, again, you know, because working in a coordinated entry project, I think another struggle that, or another challenge, I should say, that we sometimes face is that we don't necessarily know who entered that data, because at this point, the assigned staff may be someone completely different. And so if we just go based off of who's currently the assigned staff, that may not be, you know, the person who actually entered, you know, data that was poor quality. So that's just some food for thought. I don't know the best way to do that, but I think if we could have that information to best support those staff members that maybe need a little bit more support would be really helpful.
That is brilliant, Catherine. Yeah, is there a way to do that, Erin? We have like 60 people in our system.
Yeah, yes, we can put the user that created the enrollment on like looker reports. So, and I thought maybe we did that at one point too, but we can work on
Yeah, I mean, can we like, is there a way by like caseload we could do? I mean, I feel like this is like really in the weeds and like, but if by caseload we could do like a data quality report, is that something that like maybe we can set up once and then run it for whoever in the agency?
we can look at that. We might be able to do something like that with a dashboard or something. The only thing is if you have a lot of users, that could be time consuming to run if you had to pull it by staff. So we can look at it and see if there's a good way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I have staff for. You know, I mean, you know what I mean? Like we could split up, you know, divide and conquer, those types of things. Yeah, but I think that it would be really helpful to just make sure that, you know, we can say like specifically like, hey, like the last 6 months, like you've really sucked at doing this, and like you're really amazing at doing this, and like this is how we can help you. If somebody's like, if we're starting to see like patterns, I think that would be really great. But just in the future, maybe be kind of cool to maybe run that. I don't know. Thanks.
I have a comment, Cassie, related to what you were saying. If you look at the data quality corrections that we sent, there is a column at the very end. It's hidden, but you can actually unhide that, and it's AT, and it gives you the user who created the enrollment. So I don't know how helpful that would be, but if you see the, you know, the highlights, the color highlights with the errors, you can also see who is the person who entered that data.
Thank you so much for telling me that, because I actually have it pulled up right now and I just unhid it, and that's fabulous. So thank you.
Yeah, at the very end, the things that those, when I run the script, those are hidden because they're kind of auxiliary columns that I need to create. But there's actually a column that tells you who entered that. It's the column, it's user updating, and then that's the column AT.
You guys get kudo points. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just, I don't know, like maybe like, I don't know what I'm envisioning, but kind of like
I think I know what you're talking about. I think what you're looking for is more like scores by staff.
Yeah.
To see like each staff person's performance.
Yeah, I think, I mean, or like even just like an aggregate, like you know, report or something. I don't know. I'm thinking of like an APR on like a caseload or something like that. But I know that that's like super like intricate reporting, but that's kind of more like what I was thinking, so that it would be like, okay, like this is your score, and you know,
Yeah.
but it's also helpful to know that, you know, we can just look at that report and see who was entering the data. So thank you, Adriana.
Of course.
Yeah, well, it may indeed be intricate, but we will fiddle around with that idea a little bit.
Thank you. Fiddle away.
All right, any other enforcement ideas or thoughts? Okay, so I'm going to release this poll on you. It's only 3 questions. So the first question is asking, does the data quality plan have the information that your agency needs in order to manage your data quality? The second question is, how should incentives and enforcements be determined? So should it be at the agency level, the project level, or data element level? And this is a multiple choice if you think more than one of those. And then are data quality incentives and enforcements useful and or necessary? And this is anonymous, so feel free to, you know, tell it how you feel. All right. 61% of you have voted, so I'll give it a few more seconds. If you're still reading, go ahead and choose your last few responses. All right. I'm closing down the poll in 5 seconds. Okay. So I am hopefully sharing the poll results with you. So does the data quality plan have the information you need to manage your data quality? The majority said yes, so great, thank you. 3 said somewhat. If you said somewhat and you are comfortable sharing, would love to hear either if you unmute or in the comments what you think the plan needs added to it in order to help you manage your data quality. Of course, if you're comfortable sharing. All right. Next question is, how should incentives and enforcements be determined? Majority said project level, and then we had a few also say data element level and agency level. Okay, great. And then the last question, are data quality incentives and enforcements useful and or necessary? 1 said no, 6 said somewhat, and 9 said yes. Did anybody have any additional comments on these questions or any additional information they wanted to share on the data quality plan? While you all are thinking, I'll just let you know the plan is for the data quality plan to be presented to the Policies, Procedures, and Standards Committee. It does say in the COC board governance that they are ultimately responsible for the data quality plan. So this will need to be approved by the board. My expectation is that most of it will be fine. It's just their thoughts on the incentives and enforcements that we've been talking about. So I don't know if that changes anything for anyone, if you want to provide any more feedback on what we've discussed today. All right, let me just, well, give everyone one more minute to think while I keep this. All right, so I'm going to move on to the emergency project performance reports. Got a lot of stuff open right now. So if you haven't already, please review the emergency shelter project level scores. There's a lot of projects, so you'll have to do a little zooming in, but this is available on our website. And you can see along the top the different measures that the projects are being scored against, as well as the thresholds. And purple cells mean that the project met the threshold for that measure, and pink are those that did not. And then the goals and outcomes report. So this is looking at performance for the project type as a whole. So we can kind of see how we're doing, and also so the emergency shelter projects can compare their performance to the other emergency shelter projects. So goal 1 is looking at clients that entered from literally homeless situations. And while we have not hit the 100% measure, we are really close. And we are also staying consistent. So that's good news. You can see for goal 2, which is the amount of time clients are spending in emergency shelter projects, this length of time has increased since the last PPR that we ran. This is likely due to COVID, since part of the reporting period was still in 2020, and I mean, COVID isn't really over yet, but this is probably due to COVID and agencies keeping clients in their shelter longer to avoid putting them back on the streets where they're at higher risk of exposure. Goal 5 is looking at the utilization rate for emergency shelter units. And we are below our threshold, but we are consistent for the last 2 project performance reporting periods. Again, this is likely due to COVID. A lot of emergency shelter projects in particular have been accepting less clients into their projects due to social distancing regulations. Goal 6 is looking at adults that increased their income while they were enrolled in the project. And we have hit this threshold for the past couple of reports, which is great. The reason why the threshold is so low for this one is this may or may not be a focus of the emergency shelter project. And also there are so few clients in emergency shelters that stay enrolled in the project for over a year. So the universe for goal 6 is really small. I think it's like 40 clients or something like that. Goal 7 is looking at increased income for clients that exited the project. We are just under our threshold, but again, we are staying consistent across the past couple reporting periods. Goal 8 is looking at exits to permanent housing situations. We are also under our goal on this one, but staying consistent as well. And the last one is looking at clients that exited to permanent housing situations and later returned to homelessness. And we are staying the course at 9%, which is just under our threshold, which is great. So to go into a little more detail on each of the measures, first up, this is entries from homelessness again. So you can see the project type score as well as different subpopulations and how they are performing. Throughout the report, you'll see that households with only children kind of has fluctuating performance. And this is because number one, the population, the number of clients being counted is less. Also, a lot of the emergency shelter projects that have households without children have different requirements for eligibility as well as other things. Because a lot of them are RIE funded and they don't necessarily have to be homeless. So that, for example, is why this percentage is so low. In our little donut, you can see the clients that are entering from non-homeless situation, and about 75% are entering from either family friend situation. Oh, sorry, that's not what I wanted to say. 44% are from family or friends, and then another 8% are from permanent housing situations. So about 50%. And these clients may be a good candidates for diversion instead. What this means is the night before the client was staying either with family or friends or some other permanent housing situation, and then the next day they had to leave and they came to an emergency shelter. So maybe they were kicked out or something else happened, but that just something to keep in mind, that in some cases the diversion may be a good fit for these clients so they are not entering the homeless system. Next goal is looking at length of stay in emergency shelters. And you can see in our little bar chart here that almost half of enrollments are meeting our threshold of 30 days or less, which is great. And then the rest of the clients are usually staying for a year or less, and then there are about 500 that are staying for more than a year. And this is including all clients, not just head of households or adults. For unit utilization, you can see how we're doing as a project type as well as for each household type. Households with children have a much higher percentage of utilization than those without, and this is likely because emergency shelters that are for families tend to have a little more separation and privacy. And so those types of projects were less impacted by social distancing guidelines, or they weren't impacted at all. So that that's why there's that difference. Almost half of the projects are underutilized. So the guidance from HUD is that 65% to 105% is considered normal range. And so almost half are under 65%. And again, that is likely due to the social distancing. All right. Increased income for stayers, adult stayers in emergency shelters. So there's the number of clients included, it's only 43. The good news is 96% of the clients that are included either maintained or increased their income, which is great. There were very few that decreased their income or had missing income reported, so that's great news. Now looking at increased income for leavers, adult leavers. Again, you can see for project type as well as the different subpopulations. And 79% of these clients either maintained or increased their income. So that's also good news. There is a fairly high percentage of unknown for leavers. And this is likely because clients disappear from emergency shelter projects. They sometimes leave and don't return. And so when the user exits the client, they don't have any additional information on income, and that is why, that could be why this is unknown. Our next measure is looking at exits to permanent housing situations. You can see households with children is a much higher percentage of positive exits. And so I wanted to give the group a chance to weigh in on that if they have experienced that families in emergency shelter are easier to exit to permanent housing. Is it that they are disappearing less than households without children, or if there's any other feedback the group has on that?
I think just analyzing our data is that we've seen those households typically have fewer barriers to housing and more often are already employed prior to entering the project or have some sort of income. So I think it's just a matter of barriers. There's also less chronic homelessness and generally fewer disabilities.
Thanks, John Paul.
Just one other idea. It could be in terms of the kind of like the flow through CES as well. You know, that households with children have the potential to get connected to housing opportunities a lot quicker. That's one idea. Like I think also there may be a little bit more flexibility, not speaking as an emergency shelter provider, of course, but there may be more flexibility for extensions with households with children than maybe just with individuals. But those are just two thoughts that I had. I'm not sure because I don't have an emergency shelter, but.
Yeah, thanks, John Paul and Catherine. I think both of those are true. And I also kind of wonder if the households with children measure is maybe a little more accurate because less clients and households are disappearing. Like I said before, with projects, night by night projects, clients tend to disappear, and those night by night projects are for individuals. So it could be it's just that data isn't being captured, and this households with children number should be higher, which would bring up some of these other measures also, including the project type score. And then I wanted to bring up in our little bar chart, I should start calling it circle donut and bar donut. In our little bar chart, we had almost 3,000 clients that reported missing the exit destination field. So that could be, it wasn't collected, the client didn't have a response, the client refused. But that's a good amount of the exits, so that if we were able to bring that down, which I'm not saying we can, but if we could, that would really help with this measure. All right. And last but not least, we have returns from homelessness. So again, this is looking at clients that exited permanent housing and then later came back to the homeless system. Again, you can see a discrepancy between the households with children and households without children. Households with children are much less likely to return to homelessness. And that could be due to, like John Paul said, they have less barriers. And so therefore they're more likely to stay housed once they've been placed. It could also be better resources or more resources to help them before they fall back into homelessness. So all those may be true. And so our little donut in our bar chart here, the donut is looking at the type of projects that clients are returning to when they do return to the homeless system. And you can see almost 80% are returning to either emergency shelter or street outreach. And that makes sense because, you know, these are kind of the front doors to our COC, and also these can lead to coordinated entry enrollment. So it kind of makes sense. That's where these clients are showing up. And this last chart looks at where the clients exited to initially before they returned. So most exited to family and friends permanently. And then the next group is looking at either the clients owned or rented something without a subsidy, most likely rented, not owned. The third group is owned or rented with, oh, sorry, the first one was with, the second one's without subsidy. And then the last one is permanent supportive housing or other permanent housing. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the PPR?
I really wish that you would stop saying donut.
No.
No, we all want donuts now.
Yeah, well, one day we'll have, I'm just going to deliver donuts to everyone's house prior to the meeting, and then.
Can you please? That'd be nice.
Any other thoughts?
I'm just gonna say we would have asked you to stop saying donut a whole lot sooner if we had known that we would have gotten donuts delivered to us for it.
That's why I gotta double down on saying donut and start calling these donut bars.
God, you know, actually, the reason that I said it is because you had commented on that, but actually the last meeting, Catherine sent me a private message and was like, I really wish you would stop saying donut.
Cassie, it was private for a reason.
All right, so if there isn't any other comments or questions, then we can wrap up a little bit early. I'll give you guys a minute to think, but while you were thinking, the next data and performance management meeting is scheduled for August 12th. Same time, 1:30 to 3. We will send out the agenda a few days before with the next PPR. And following this meeting, we will also send out the recording and all the materials that we discussed today. Any last lingering comments or questions? All right, thank you guys so much for attending and for providing your feedback. It was very helpful, and hope you all have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, friends.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.